Or take two. I'm changing course with my video for today, and I just tried to set the foundation for what this video is going to be about in my last attempt, and cocked it up badly. When you venture into new territory with anything, usually there's this propensity to get lost and to try and justify yourself and all of these sorts of things, and I found myself doing that. So I'll try to stick to the nuts and bolts of what I'm getting at here. I'm going to use the whiteboard today, and if I do go a little bit astray, if I do get a little bit away with the fairies on things here, please forgive me and just try to stay. I'll get to the point eventually, okay? So I know those of you who do follow my videos and who have been following them for a while are beginning to report back to me that the application of what you learn in my videos, coupled with the teachings and workbook lessons of the course, are beginning to make profound changes in your lives, and which is the whole point of it. You know, like, that's the beautiful part of any spiritual discipline. If you're practicing something for years and years and having no result, stop it. Just stop it and do something else. It's quite obvious, really, isn't it? If you're eating chili con carne every day, and then you know, realizing how much you don't like eating chilies, just stop it. Eat something else. So anyway, today I'm going to use the whiteboard. Here it is, and I've put a few little prompts up for myself so I don't get too far astray. And they're biblical prompts, you might notice, if you can read my very scrubby handwriting there. I wanted to talk about symbolism today, about how the outside world obviously is a symbolic reflection of my internal state of mind. What I see out there symbolizes how I see myself. Okay? Now, there's only two ways to see myself: as the spirit or as the flesh. If I'm seeing through the body's eyes, I'm seeing the storyline of the flesh. I'm seeing the storyline of other bodies and other stories attributed to those bodies, etc., and what's going on and what's happening and who's doing this, and somebody said something, none of which is real. It's all the Maya. The whole thing's the matrix. People, trees, houses, planets, stars, it's all not real. Okay, and I'm not the only one saying all of this crazy stuff now. I mean, it's all over the internet, you know, the matrix, and are we living in a simulation? And it's everywhere. It's like it has to be, because mind is waking up, right? Not woke, waking up to the fact that even within the spectrum, the idea of being a woke person is still just an illusion. You know, it's not true awakening. Spiritual awakening is true awakening, where you exit the world entirely, where you have a non-linear experience of yourself, such as I've had, and several of them, where you're out of your body. And I'm not talking about a near-death experience or an altered, well, in a sense it's an altered state experience, but a spiritual experience that gives you 100% certifiable proof to yourself. You'll never be able to prove it to anyone else. They'll just look at you like you're crazy. But certifiable proof to yourself, and you're the only one that needs the proof, no one else needs to know, that God is a fact. Right? You can have many out-of-body experiences and non-temporal experiences that are just like a quick visit to Disneyland, and you're like, what the hell was that? And people are reporting all these sorts of things with DMT and psilocybin and everything, and I've been down that road before many moons ago, over 3 decades ago now, but and had those experiences, and really they did nothing more than confuse me, and they weren't in relation to anything. And what do I make from this? And you know, what does this show me? And of course it all shows you that there's more, that there's something that the mind is capable of, but it doesn't really put it into context. And I find that when you are doing those workbook lessons of the course, and using prayer and meditation as you're instructed to, and all of this sort of thing, as well as diving into your own predilections, you know, with what regards to what it is you feel drawn to participate in, the experiences that you have tend to be more organic. and they keep pace with you, and they all tend to reflect the nature of the path that you're on as, let's say, someone who's going from a dark, miserable, horrible life to a beautiful, wonderful, peaceful life, you know, and a life lived in God, let's say, or a divine life. You can talk a heavenly life, talk about it however you like. You know, you're turning lead into gold in the old alchemical kind of analogy. So the symbolism of things is very important because you're learning to identify your state of mind through the symbolism of your world. And if I draw a little map, I'll just come here. If I draw a little map, like here's the world, right, in general, let's say, and everybody, we're all on there doing whatever we seem to be doing. And I'm saying we're all on there because even though it's a dream, you have to include the dreaming mind. You have to include that part in, because that's where this operates. That's where forgiveness has its workbench, if you like. You know, you can't forgive in the celestial realms. What are you going to forgive? Forgiveness, the acceptance of God's forgiveness, which is essentially the acceptance of the way appointed you, which looks like symbolically forgiveness. There's nothing really to forgive because you're divine. But it looks like that we're playing it all out here on this little theatre of a ball of mud spinning in the middle of, you know, a universe of bizarreness. But what's it meant to look like? We're talking about a dream in the mind of God. I mean, look at this thing I'm representing it through. This skin and this hairy stuff and these things on my face, which I don't really need. And whiteboards. What's it meant to look like? What did you think it was going to look like? It could look like jellyfish land, and we're all, you know, why doesn't it look like that? I mean, it does for the jellyfish. So everything's seen through symbols, right? Everything is seen through symbols. I'll just step this back a little. And in general, if I do, let's just say the majority of my life plays out in Australia. If I can do it. Better put Tasmania. They don't like it when you miss them out. And I'm somewhere currently, I'm sitting somewhere around here, and I'm soon moving to down here. But I've also visited out here, and I've been up to here, and up to here, and I've been over here, and I've been down here, and I've been here, and I've been over here, and various other smaller places, right? And all of these places I've been, relationships, interactions, and everything make up the story of my life, right? And also you could say, well, I've been to other countries over here and over here, which is all true enough in the sense of, you know, it's all true in the dream, right? Without anything else to compare it to, it's all true. It's only when you have an out-of-body experience or a spiritual experience that you realize you have something else to compare it to, which now, let's call it this spiritual experience over here that you can't describe because the language here only is relevant to what's here, right? You have this experience, but because it's a higher frequency, it's more natural to you, right? Because you come from the highest, oh, top of my head's buzzing. You come from, let's say you're journeying down through the dimensions, down through the different vibratory experiences, in that idea of my father's house has many mansions, right? So I'm experiencing the different, or Jacob's ladder, you know, so I'm coming down Jacob's ladder and I'm here in this bottom rung having this experience. From here it's only going up. So when you start to have, you know, it's like the story of the prodigal son. You come down Jacob's ladder, and then you get to the bottom, you do what you do down here, which is this, and then you start going up again on the other side. But you go up through exactly the same paradigms of experience and life presentation in the dreaming mind, in the illusory mind, as you do coming down. And so they become more familiar to you. Right? So you're here in thing, and then my illumination happened over here in Byron Bay, and then you have this experience, and that seems real, and this seems false. It's like, hang on a minute, I just experienced something else that is more real to me, and how it's hard to understand something being more real than what you now call real. But if you went to Disneyland, and you went on the ghost train and you went in there, and it's like, oh, and you come out, I mean, it was still within the framework of your reality, but you know that it's not real, right? This is Disneyland, right? This is not real. And you have to have the experience of getting out of Disneyland, coming out of the other side of the ghost train and finding yourself back here for a second. And you're like, holy shit, I was just on the ride all the time. Bill Hicks calls it a ride. There's nothing to worry about, man. It's just a ride, Bill, good on you, Bill. So, learning to use the symbolism. And I want to get to baptism because I've been telling Tyna and pushing her to go and get baptized recently, and she's very resistant to it. She has no intention of going to get baptized and gives me every excuse and every story. But the fact that there is still excuses and stories tells me she's not being miracle-minded about it. So I'm making this video in order for... and that was good, yeah. I just got told that was good. She heard that, I'm sure. And you have to have these prompts. You have to. It's like I had the bloody Archangel Michael. Can you believe that? The Archangel Michael, and this is before enlightenment, before my enlightenment. And any of you guys that have seen that story of, I think I've done a video on it. I'll have to check, actually. Maybe I haven't. But prior to my illumination, I was addicted to all sorts of drugs and alcohol, and gave it up immediately upon illumination, but as a dependency. But I had a very profound and scary experience on magic mushrooms, on blue meanies, which I was told don't take those blue ones because they're really strong, you won't handle it. But I did. I found some and I took them, and I had an experience that I couldn't handle, as I was told I would, but I didn't listen. I was stubborn. I had a very horrible demonic kind of experience that was very, very real to me, as real as Disneyland is when you don't know that there's something else other than Disneyland. And I had a little card in my cupboard, a little business card thing that was given to me by the Jehovah's some time before, who always seem to knock on my door. And I think they're good at recognising a troubled soul, But on the back of that card was a prayer to the Archangel Michael, and I remember being under my bed in the middle of this very bad trip, and demons flying around in my room trying to lure me out from under the bed. And whilst the demons were flying off around to other parts of my house and coming back and I snuck out from under the bed, grabbed the card out from the cupboard and dived back under my bed and started reading that prayer over and over and over again, which of course, because everything's just my mind manifesting and projecting, all of a sudden appears Archangel Michael, right? Who grabbed a hold of this demon that was flying around, a little red, iconic kind of demon-looking demon, and that's what my mind makes up. I'm very basic. And with little flappy wings, and put him in an iron cage, locked the door, put a crimson cloth, a purple sort of cloth over the thing, and cast it off into eternity, into the nothingness, into the vanishing point of the void, I guess. I don't know how to. It just kept going and I watched it, and it became just to nothing, right? Because it is nothing. And then the Archangel Michael looked at me from under my bed, and I was peering up, and I'm telling you, I've had people tell me that it probably wasn't part of the trip, and I'm going to tell you why I think that too. I'm thinking that it was the legit Archangel Michael, as my mind imagines the Archangel Michael to be, simply because he looked at me with his beautiful armor and beautiful, just beyond description, like this, looked at me like this and said, baptism, one word, and that word just, it was like a sonic boom going through me. And then the trip stopped. That's why I think it was real. The trip stopped immediately. Now, anyone who's ever had a profound hallucinogenic trip will tell you that it just gradually wears off. You just realise that it's sort of finishing. But this stopped immediately, and right in the middle of the worst part of it, like right in the middle of the, I was only probably an hour and a half into what would probably have been a 10-hour trip. So that gives you some idea. But it's impossible from within Disneyland to say what levels of reality are possible. I mean, with God, all things are possible, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But getting back to the symbology of things, I went and got baptized as I was instructed. In the journey between where I lived at the time and going to visit my parents, there was a little ministry called Frontline Ministry on the border of New South Wales and Queensland, two states in our country. And I used to go past there all the time, going to visit my parents, taking the shortcut through the old highway. And so I pulled in there. I went up there and pulled in and cut a long story short, was baptised there by John and his wife, John the Baptist. And the baptism itself wasn't particularly anything. The story of that trip and what led up to the baptism for me was more the precursor to change than the baptism itself. The baptism was just symbolic to me that I had crossed a kind of a threshold. Now, you probably notice I've written it up there in bigger letters, baptism. What I want to talk about, and I'm going to talk about my brother Willem, who has now passed from the realm. My brother Willem had an experience on the side of the road over in West Australia near Albury, I think. Can't quite remember, but we went for a ministry and outreach adventure. Adventure was pretty much the word. All the way over here to visit his daughters and visit his family many, many years ago. And Margot, his wife at the time here, told us, and this was just after he passed, told us that he had this occurrence on the side of the road. He was driving along, fell into a deep depression about his life at the time and couldn't go on, and pulled over on the side of the road and prayed apparently right then and there, and had a revelation right then and there. That was his awakening on the side of the road. It can happen anywhere. And when we went over, we were driving over, there was me, Sienna, and Gina, I think. And I know we did have Luke with us, but he got homesick and had to go back. And I think Gina came and joined us for the rest of the journey. But we didn't know where exactly he had his awakening, and really it wasn't even on my mind. But as we were driving along the road, Sienna started to feel unwell. She said, "Man, I don't really feel good. I feel all this energy, and she was all antsy, and she'd been antsy before. She was a very sensitive kind of person." And I think Gina said, "Yeah, I'm feeling the same. I think we should pull over." And I felt the same. I'm like, we could all feel it. In the same way that people say they feel the energy when they go to Stonehenge or sacred sites, you can feel it, right? And some things I've never really felt, and I've been to a lot of these sacred sites. But this one, we could feel it. And we pulled over and we had to do a little light session on the side of the road, like the three of us came together, where two or more are gathered in my name. There I am in the midst of them. And we did a standing meditation and went to light together and allowed for that energy that was coming up in us to be dispelled and released and everything else like that. So, and then we were good to go again. But when we got back, I took note of the place that we were between these two little tiny Australian towns. And I spoke to Margot about it, and she said that's where Willem had his had his thing, So you leave these. There are these energetic markers. It's a true thing, right? Within the dream where nothing is true, it's as true as anything else. Okay. You can feel it. when we do a light session, when in all of my houses that I've owned or had or rented or whatever, I've dedicated a room. And even when we were down in Tilba, when we were in Mackay, you know, we had a room that was specifically dedicated for doing light work, doing the light session. We would put on music. It was used for meditation, teaching, and light only, nothing else. There was no other excuse for anyone to be in that room. It was, you know, and that room is symbolic of a space in your mind that you offer to the Holy Spirit, right? Everything outside is a symbolic representation of your own internal determination to awaken from the dream. So everything being symbolic, that room was symbolic. Right? Now, I think it wasn't the movie The 13th Floor, but there was one of those movies where they were presenting the idea that the world is an illusion. It's a matrix. And they always sent in two people to go in. I can't remember the name of the bloody movie. It might have been Resurrection. There's been a few movies called Resurrection, but they were trying to get this guy out, you know, and it's much like the movie Inception, where they drop into different layers of the dream. They were trying to get this guy out of the dream, out of the 13th floor or whatever it was that he was stuck in. But the 13th floor, I'll just call it that because I can't remember what it was really called, but it was representing his map, his storyline, right? This guy's storyline. Within the story, within the virtual reality of the experience that he's having in this computer-generated world, everything is symbolizing through AI, which is now very realistic, so you can imagine how it appears realistic. Everything was symbolizing his life, and he was looking at his memories, people that had passed away, and there they were again, alive, you know, and things. And one of the rooms he's in a long corridor, and each room represented symbolically a different part of his life. So he went into one room, and there was his dad who had passed, right? There was his dad. And the other guy who didn't go into the rooms, he stayed in the corridor, right? Stayed on the narrow path, which is also symbolic, said to him, don't go in. Look from the door, but don't go in, because once you're in there, once you're interacting with it, your mind will make it real to you. Okay? But he went in. The guy went in, started talking to his dad, and then, of course, the memories and everything was so overpowering. It made it so real, just like this seemed so real without any reference of that. Right? It made it so real to him that he couldn't get out again. I think in the end he did get out, but whatever. But time in the illusion too. In the movie, time was presented as like heaps of time goes past, you know, like he was in there for 10 minutes in the movie till they got him out. But in his real life, outside of the computer-generated world, 40 years had gone by or something. I wish I could remember the name of it. If any of you guys recall that or it sounds familiar, pop it down below. So I want to look at baptism, and I'm probably going to use these references from the New Testament, because I don't use the New Testament much, but I do love the New Testament, especially the Sermon on the Mount. But I want to look at the idea of baptism in relationship to, let me see if I can use a different colour. I'll use red because it's kind of holy, I suppose, crimson, something, any excuse. Give it all the meaning you want. Doesn't mean anything. So let's just say, where are we? My baptism happened here, and then there's Willem's occurrence that happened here, you know, and there's all these other sorts of different things. Right now you'll have where I'm moving to Glen Innes very, very shortly in the next week or so. They have a circle of stones, and I'll do it as a circle. It's somewhere down there. Right, it's symbolic. It's not an actual activated circle. It's a symbolic circle, which is built more for the identity of the community rather than for use by ancient pagans and druids, etc. But nonetheless, you get the idea what I'm trying to say. There are these marker points. They're energetic marker points. They represent something. They symbolize something, whether you can see them or not. In the case of this one, you can't see them. In the case of this, you can obviously see it, and in the case of my baptism here, you can't see it, but there's a little sign there saying ministry, you know. So there's these sort of signs and symbols, and if you like Freudian stuff, or was it Jung, Totem and Taboo, one of those guys wrote that beautiful book. If you like all that sort of stuff, that's actually how things are working. So if your mind gravitates to symbols and stuff, you'll enjoy this video, which is already 25 minutes long. Good Lord, maybe I'll do a part A and a part B. But so in John, right now, and I'm just advocating for baptism here, because as I started this video, Tyna is looking at the idea of getting baptized. And you have to remember, nothing comes to you by accident, right? Even if it just looks like me telling Tyna you should go and get baptized, right? And then harping on her about that. And the reason that I'm saying that is because I want her to put down a marker. Now, it's a symbolic marker, right? It's a symbolic, and mankind has marked his great advents of all sorts of things with ceremonies and traditions, and, you know, and all these sorts of things. But of course, once you turn the advent of something that occurs to you into a tradition or a ceremony, it falls in between the cracks of into religious observance, and therefore ceases to become something that is present in the here and the now, and becomes rather something that is upkept because of its past references, which renders it into the realm of the ego. And anyone who's ever participated in a event for the first time, like if you were a Celt perhaps, and you went along to the celebration of Beltane, you know, and you went for the first year, you know, and then all of a sudden they're saying, well, come on, it's Beltane again this year, and you're like, well, I've already done that, you know. Or that's probably not a great one, but if you went and got some kind of, you know, milestone in your life, let's celebrate it again and again, like a bloody birthday. It's like you have a birthday, you know, and it's like, well, yes, I understand this is the day of the year that I was born. Do I have to celebrate it every year? Like, is it really a thing? It's like, can't we just acknowledge that I was born into the earth, have the use of this vessel, and be done with it? Do I have to commit one day every year to this ridiculous lighting that go, make a wish? So, the idea then of things as being symbolic, it's like, well, if you look at Buddha, right? So Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree. He got frustrated with all his efforts to come up with the answers of why suffering exists, sat down under the Bodhi tree, had a revelation, and ever since, people have been sitting under trees trying to meditate. That's how Buddha did it. This is how we have to do it, turning it into a ritual and a bloody tradition and a you know, repetitive, mindless, you know. Whereas Willem just pulled over on the side of the road. You know, I was having a very bad hallucination. There's no way to know how it happens, what happens, how the divine intervenes in your life to correct your course, anything like that. But symbolically, we can look at baptism as something that represents a line in the sand, right? Symbolically. You may already say, well, I'm a practitioner of the teachings of Christ. You know, I don't call myself a Christian. I don't call myself a Buddhist or anything. But I'm a practitioner of, pardon me, spiritual teachings and the principles that they embody in my life, which just happen to be those taught by Jesus, and also those taught by Buddha, and also those taught by Krishna, and also those taught by anyone else who's taught a singular way of looking at life, the universe, and everything as being love. And you know, the idea of baptism then as being that line in the sand is symbolic of the decision I make or have made in my life to give my life to truth, rather than to vacillate out here, back to the blue pen, rather than to vacillate within the experience of my separation or my story of non-truth. And there comes a point, it's like, all right, well, I don't know what truth is. I'm told the truth is within me. I have to seek it there, seek the kingdom where it is. The kingdom of heaven is within. And part of the process of that seeking is to commit myself to make this absolute 100%, never going back to the old ways kind of stand, line in the sand. I'm crossing this, I'm drawing this line, I'm not going back. It's a commitment that you make to yourself. Now, in where are we? John 3:5, you've got Jesus talking to Nicodemus, who's one of the Sanhedrin in the temple and a close friend of Jesus. You know, he's not one of the more zealot kind of people. Everyone has, you know, every religious order has those that are like this and those that are, hey, you know, Nicodemus, hey, you know, like he's more like that. So Jesus is telling Nicodemus, unless you be born again, unless man is born of, you know, baptized of the water and of the Spirit, cannot enter the kingdom, right? So clearly Jesus is talking about a symbolic gesture. Make yourself known, right? Unless you're going to have this ritual, unless you're going to do this ceremony, or what, not a ritual, but unless you're going to undergo this ceremonial moment, right? And I'll use a green one actually. Use that blue one, but so, and I'll just do it over here somewhere. Unless you're going to have this moment and make your own mark, right? Put your own impression into the world with witnesses, because where two or more are gathered, right? And that's kind of like an uncompromising stance from Jesus, where he says, this is how I'll know that you are my follower. This is how I'll know that you are following me, that you will become baptized. You know, and even in the River Jordan, you know, I forget the exact words, but where John the Baptist says something to Jesus like, I'm not even worthy to untie your shoes, Lord, you know, I can't baptize you. And he says, unless you baptize me, what does he say? Unless you baptize me, the Holy Spirit can't come upon me, or something like that, right? So the idea of baptism is powerful, right? Even Jesus recognizes that symbolically something has to occur, right? Now, in the Course in Miracles, there is this beautiful piece that I've been harping on about lately. Listen, learn, and do. There is a doing to everything, right? That's why he sent the disciples out. Go out. Where are we here? Matthew 28, 19 to 20. Go and baptize in my name, in the name of the Spirit. Right? Go out and teach and baptize. Right? Baptize. That baptizing is a symbolic participation between the uninitiated and the initiate. Right? And it brings the uninitiated into the initiate's world. Now, I'm going to spin the references here a little bit. If you have a computer, and there's a keyboard there, right? And all of a sudden, you're using your computer, keys, and there's a screen, right? All of a sudden, you're using your computer, and you get a virus, right? You get a virus, and I mean, people don't really get viruses anymore. The software is so up to date and good. In the early days, you'd get a virus every time you went on the internet, and antiviral companies made a lot of money selling you programs. I remember having Norton every year on my thing, until finally Windows sort of upped the ante, and their home defense system is quite good now. But there's two ways to fix a virus, okay? One of those is to send in Jesus, right? And in relationship to the computer, one of those is to put in a floppy disk. That's how old I am. One of those is to put in another program with an antivirus thing on it, right? And you do that from the outside. And you put it in your, oh, there's another bit to the computer, isn't there? Completely forgot. This is the high tower there, and you've got your ports and different things. And you put it in there, and it reconfigures this to get rid of whatever the virus is, right? It's specifically designed to get rid of that virus. Now, Jesus did that 2,000 years ago through the resurrection. The virus being the idea of separation, represented symbolically the foundation of which is the idea of death. And Jesus comes and he proves there's no such thing as death. Watch this. Nail me to a cross, and then 3 days later, hey, put your fingers in here, And I know I make it sound quite simple, but it is quite simple, really. But and the other way, like rather than having to get a whole virus of this, but this, and I'll try and tie it in with my computer analogy because I was enjoying it in my thinking about it earlier on today. The other way to fix a virus is to go into the computer and look where it is that the virus entered your computer and get at it there, right? So, which is like over here. So, all right, well, I've got an unholy virus here. Let's just say I'm not, Jesus hasn't come yet, but in the days of the Druids and whatever before, and and medicine men and whatever, before Jesus came, you would have a virus on your computer, in those prehistoric computers, and you would have to go to wherever it is, Let's just say this virus, and in the old days, the computer might, which is a means of communication, you might have had smoke signals or drum beats or whatever, and somebody beats a drum over here and you don't like the beat. It's like you're hearing it over here and it's like, well, I've got to go over there and tell them they're getting the beat wrong. I'm saying send over more bread and more wine, and they're sending over bread and water. It's like, hang on a minute. And it's like they're obviously not understanding our communication here, what we want to send. So there's no point trying to continue in the means of communication that we're using currently because they're not getting it. Let's go over there and help them to understand communication so that in the future we can have this back and forth, and we can learn to communicate as we're communicating. So baptism then is like, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to teach them the ways of the Spirit, right? And this will mark, the baptism will mark the end of that old bad drumming sequence or smoke signal sequence, and the beginning of the new way where everyone can understand, where we're all one, where we can come together in a single unified experience of communication that that has heavenly proportions to it. And I hope that analogy's okay. I mean, I've just made that up. But if you look at, and I've got even here John 4, right? So the woman at the well, where Jesus is talking to her about, if you drink of the water that I give you, you'll never be thirsty again. He's giving her the opportunity to make a choice, to make a decision about what she wants to do. She suddenly recognizes he's the Messiah, and that suddenly recognizes, I think, what he's talking about when he says, because she says to him something like, you don't have any water, like you're coming to the well. What do you mean the water that you have? He's talking about the new communication, the new way of interacting with each other through love and forgiveness, etc., etc. Right? Even in Matthew 26 to 29, where they're breaking the bread, the Last Supper, Jesus says, eat this bread and drink this wine, so then you are of me, and then I'm not going to drink any more wine until we're back together again in the next celestial realm. And it's symbolic. It's like, yes, Jesus, in essence, it's like signing a contract, right? It's like signing it. It's like saying yes, and like, let your actions reflect your words, because there's 12 of you guys sitting around this table. You're all going to have a sip of that wine. You're all going to have a bite of that bread. And each of you is going to recognize that you've all done that. And if one of you wanders off down the track, you're going to come back to that point as a reference point for your devotion. And you're going to go, hey, brother, remember that day we sat there and ate the bread and drank the wine? Oh, thanks for reminding me. I did make that commitment. I did make that promise. I did participate in that. Right? I was baptized in that particular way. And the bread and the wine, you might say, well, that's not really a baptism. And in a sense it isn't, but it's still symbolic of a commitment. Right? It's still symbolic of saying yes to Jesus, which of course is saying yes to yourself, yes to the higher good, yes to God. Jesus being also just a symbol for what it is that he came to represent. Right? I hope you can hear that. Don't worship the man, practice the teachings. That's how you worship him. Okay, if you want to worship him. I don't worship anyone or anything. It's like I don't believe in worship in a sense. It's like, let my actions be my living expression of what it is I'm about. Living worship, living devotion. But baptism itself, it's a big one. And I know that a lot of people can procrastinate because it's where the rubber meets the road. It's where actions and words, or actions and thoughts, come together. Once you bring them together, you cannot deny that you did it. It leaves a marker somewhere, somehow. I mean, in Tina's case, let's say, and I'm just projecting here for the purposes of making this video, in Tina's case, regardless of whether some sort of epiphany happens at the baptism or anything like that, the build-up and the story of the baptism is going to have so much gravity to it that the story is going to be just as pertinent as the actual action of the baptism itself. It's like I couldn't wait to get baptized fast enough, because the little demons flying around trying to tempt me was so convincing. I would have done anything. As it happens, at that time, I was looking for God, and my reasoning for taking those mushrooms was that I had already had one quite unsettling experience on psychedelics where, not in the same demonic context, but where I felt like I was, pardon me, in a sense of hopelessness, and like everything just collapsed in on itself. And so in my ignorance, I assumed that if I found some other kind of psychedelic, maybe I could have a more beatific, more divine kind of experience, which of course backfired. Luckily for me, backfired, And I look at that and I think it's funny how all those things lined up, And my resistance to saying yes to Christ, or yes to baptism, not that I really knew baptism was coming, it was on the horizon of my thing, but my resistance was there. Right? I wanted to do it my own way. I had this whole dogged kind of, in the end I had to be told by the Archangel Michael, how arrogant must I have been? Bring out the big guns. Dave's never going to hear this from just a local bloke down the road. He's such an arsehole. It's good to be able to laugh at yourself. Oh dear, oh dear. So, I don't know that I have much more to say about it than that. I'm 44 minutes in already. But there are certain events, certain things that'll happen in your lifetime that become, when you look back, they're like landmarks or mind marks for transformation, and you can't deny those things because they're in the doing. And the reason you can't deny them is because you don't have another version of reality at the time by which to decide, even in the overall scope of things, whether they're illusory or not. You've only got here what's in Disneyland, you know, you don't have this yet. You're looking for this, but you have to put down these marks of consecrated sort of decisions, like, yes, this is bloody hell and I need to renew it again, and I need to do this, and I'm going on a pilgrimage, or I'm going to give all my money to charity and become an ascetic, and you know, or whatever. There are these things that you do, and symbolically they represent an action of mind. And I remember when I gave away my house, I just walked out, quit my job, just left. And there was moments of like, what have I done? But I couldn't deny the reason that I did them, you know. I'd had an epiphany, I'd had a revelation, I'd had face to face with God. It's like I had to be about what it was that I was meant to be about. Thank you, Annie, for that. Getting my ass to my teacher, Ted. I think that's about it. I love you guys, I really do. Today I was, before I made this video, I was looking at ideas of symbols and things, and looking at it with reference to where I'm moving into Glen Innes, where the stone circle is. And I was looking at the stone circle actually as an idea of the symbolism of what it represents. And not feeling particularly drawn to it because it is manufactured. It's not organically put there. It's deliberately put there as a tourist thing or a landmark to say, hey, we're Celtic people around here. It wasn't built to worship the festivals of spirit or anything like that, you know, or the markings of certain events. It's just a fake circle. But it still does stand as a symbol, and I was looking at that, you know, and feeling a certain way, which is what inspired me to do this on the whiteboard. Feeling a certain way about that as an idea of the different stages of my life and what it's going to symbolize to me. Not that I want to give it a meaning outside of being told divinely, but what it's going to symbolize to me moving from one section of my ministry into another part. And to me, there is a very clear line in the sand that seems to be looming where I'm going to be moving here very shortly. And I'm going to use that opportunity to spend more time in prayer and meditation and in recluse, as well as setting up the house as a kind of a resource center for those who are devoted to the course, those who are devoted to their mind training, and who want to learn in collaboration with me, whatever might come about for learning. But I'm feeling, in the same way I could feel this, right? In the same way I could feel all the other things that I've felt. And this is where the heart space comes in, following your heart, right? I can feel it, that there is something in my blood, in the wind, whatever. I haven't been told yet. Sometimes I get told things, sometimes I'm privy to a little information, and sometimes I just hear the voice of my teacher, Ted, who says, cover your potatoes, which is in another video I made. sometimes you just get practical advice, or, you know, cover your potatoes means in that particular instance, Dave, don't worry about it, I got this. You just cover your potatoes, be about what you need to do there in the kitchen. And it's funny because I looked around at my potatoes, the Hessian cloth that I keep over my potatoes to stop them from going green, it was off. And it's like, how did that come off the things? And I got told, cover your potatoes. I turn around and boom, what? Anyway, that's it. I love you guys. I do. I really mean that. When I was looking at the stone circle idea this morning, and how much humanity as a whole has put effort into coming to know God, into traversing the realms of the unseen and the unwitnessable. It's like, oh man, my heart just goes out. My heart, I feel it. I feel the love. I feel the passion and the devotion. Everyone who's ever said a prayer, you know. And I feel blessed and I feel loved by all of that. Like, it's just, and I'm sorry I'm such a dunce and I'm so slow and I'm so bloody stupid on the uptake of all this stuff. You know, it seems so obvious now that I'm looking at it, but, and have been looking at it for 30 years, you know, as an idea of mind looking at itself, examining what happened in that tiny mad idea, and, you know, accepting the program that's been written for the resurrection, and also participating within the program, you know, in my own way, making sure that program gets where it needs to get, and things that happen with it need to happen, which is this baptism. Unless a man is born of the water and of the Spirit, and being born of the Spirit will come upon you automatically, right? The Holy Spirit will come upon you at your request. And that's another video, that's another whole thing, because we're nearly at an hour. But inviting the Holy Spirit is something you don't do as lip service. You climb a mountain, you bloody whatever. It's got to be, it's right here. So, all right, I love you guys. I love you. I really do. I wish I could just scoop you all up and absorb you into me, and we could all disappear into light right here and now, and we can. But but in time and space, that seems to have this playing out where, you know, it takes time. But at least, like Jesus says in the Course, you know, at least a miracle substitutes for learning that might have taken thousands of years. So we've got lesson 77, I'm entitled to miracles, and if you've got your course book, go and read it at least 10 times in a row. Read it again and again and again. You are entitled, right, to miracles because you're a child of God. Let that sink in. If you have to read it 100 times, I told Dean the other day, read that lesson 100 times. And he's like, yep, I will. He got to about the third or fourth lesson and he wrote back something to me saying, I'm totally blessed. The penny dropped, something went poof. It's amazing how you can read those lessons and nothing gets in, and then if you read them again and again with patience and determination, all of a sudden, bam. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. It's a lot to unpack there. You know, the outside world symbolizes either my denial of God or my witness to the truth of God within me, and the symbols in my own interpretation of the symbols, because I've given them all the meaning they have, they'll show me where I'm at and what's going on. The mirror never lies. Remember that, the mirror never lies. What you see in the world outside you is a true and faithful representation of your own state of mind. If you see shit and chaos and hopelessness and whatever, you got work to do. And I promise you, the same things will appear and you won't see them. The same things will appear, the shit and the hopelessness and the chaos, It won't disturb your peace of mind. You won't react to it at all because you're the one giving it all the meaning it has. Withdraw that meaning, heal your mind of giving falsity, meaning to illusion, and find the kingdom of heaven within, and it won't disturb you. Let the world be as vicious as it wants. You won't react to it at all. All right, I love you. Peace.